All right, everybody, welcome today to the Exit Your Way Business Roundtable. I have to say we're really excited today because this is our inaugural episode on LinkedIn Live. Hopefully we're streaming to LinkedIn. Woo! On our company page. Let me check over here 1 second to see. I don't see it on there yet, but I'm sure. But it'll be there sooner than later. But with us today, we have Ron Higgs. There we are. LinkedIn Live on LinkedIn on my screen over here. If you didn't know that already, we're really excited about that. We've only applied like a dozen times, and didn't get it yet. But with us today, we've got Ron Higgs, great friend of ours, naval pilot, veteran. Now he helps people in the private sector as a fractional COO. And does a bunch of wonderful things with veterans as well. Happy to have you here, Ron. Just glad to be able to talk to you today.
Great to be here. I feel like I'm under a lot of pressure for your first broadcast for LinkedIn Live, but thanks for having me.
No way.
Everybody's watching.
Yeah, everybody's watching, so we just get all nervous and stuff.
But I think compared to landing airplanes on a flight deck, it would be a piece of cake.
Yeah. So I will tell you guys, I was a naval flight officer. So you remember the Top Gun, Maverick and Goose, so I was Goose. I was in the back, right? And so actually, I think, who do you think is braver, the guy doing it or the guy sitting in the back while the other guy is landing? So
that's a good point, because if you're the one that doesn't have control of the plane.
Yeah, I flew an airplane with dual sets of controls, got my share of flying in, but I was I was not a fighter guy. I did some S3 Viking. Did get a chance to fly the F/A-18 in flight test in Pawtucket River, Maryland. So
yeah,
well, it didn't work out too well for Goose. So
so first of all, I mean, let's talk a little bit about your naval flight career, because you mentioned to me one time, and just because I like it's interesting. You said you landed a plane on fire.
Yeah, so that kind of stuff is not in the brochure. So lots of times aircraft have problems, and we have to deal with said problems. So we had a generator catch on fire, and we had to land the airplane immediately with smoke coming out of the engine, and the engine being on fire. Now we were able to land and get the fire out. The aircraft was not destroyed, but it was an interesting few moments.
Yeah, no doubt. So I didn't mean we are actually going to talk about bias here in just a moment. And I appreciate you stopping by to do that with us. But when you fly a plane for as many hours as you did, because you flew a lot in the Navy and then you were a test pilot after, does it get like riding a bike? I mean, comfortable? You're comfortable. Oh, if the engine goes out, it's really not that big a deal. You're just kind of working through it and do what you got to do, or
no, it's a perishable skill, and there's lots of training. Lots of training. You have to have monthly training, yearly training, constant training, and complacency is what kills people.
Yeah, right? I would imagine so.
There can never be complacency. There's not one time that I got in an airplane that I thought, man, I got this, I'm totally comfortable, because you have no idea what can happen. You take, especially an aircraft carrier, you take off an aircraft carrier, you really have no idea where you're going to land. And I had a couple of those experiences where something happened to the ship, and the ship just kind of went dead in the water, and they sent us all away. Meaning, we had an alternate place to go, but they're like, hey, you can't come back to the ship, so you got to go to the alternate landing field where we did. So when we took off that day, we thought we were coming back to the ship, but big surprise, we were not. So anything could happen in an aircraft. You know what I mean? When you take off, you never know where or when you're going to land. I mean, if everything goes according to plan, it's great, which it does most of the time, but you have to be ready. So in flight school, it doesn't take long to actually learn how to fly. Right, how to do your planning and deal with emergencies is really what takes a long time.
Yeah.
Well, of course, we want to tie that to exiting your business, but yeah.
Please go ahead. Let me see you make that statement.
Hey, that's the same thing though. Complacency.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And I think it happens with professional firefighters, police officers.
Yeah.
It's like anybody in a dangerous occupation. Complacency. Oil people working on oil drills, oil platforms, that type of stuff. Divers, right? Complacency can kill you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Interesting. It's really cool to hear that, because that's one thing that I often wondered is if flying just gets easier and easier. So it's not, but it's good to know. So today we're going to talk about bias. We were actually had the panel a while ago on the Thursday event, and we talked about veterans, the value that veterans bring to business. And one of the things that got brought up in the chat and a little bit as we were discussing it was military bias. And then you talked, and we talked after about it, and thought it might be interesting for us to talk about bias in your perspective.
Well, just before we go on to that, just for background for anybody who didn't really see that roundtable that Ron participated in, he brought a panel of veterans, and we talked about the value of veterans in the business. In that, for them, there are challenges of transitioning into the business community, and also all the value that they bring to the private sector and to businesses. So it was a fantastic roundtable. And then this is a continuation of the discussion, because we started talking about bias as good and bad.
Yeah.
So we decided we wanted to get in with Ron directly here and talk a little about that, and how that relates into business as well from their experience.
Well, yeah. And as we discussed, Ron, not only as we discussed in the panel about the military bias, and I want to cover that, but then about being an African American in the military and in the private workforce, and how that bias that you see there too, and that's it's certainly on a lot of people's minds now, and in the United States world, it'd be good to do so. As you were thinking about this, what are some of your thoughts where we would start with this, Ron?
Well, again, we talked about veterans. I have a bias towards veterans, and mine is a positive one, right? Because I have one, and I sort of know what I'm going to get when I hire a veteran, right? I already know all those things. But there's an overwhelming majority of people who have not interacted with veterans before. Frighteningly small percentage of the population has been in the military, have families in the military. And unfortunately, a lot of folks get their impressions of the military from some of the things that they see on television and through Hollywood. And those things aren't necessarily true. You've got images of indestructible heroes, and then you've got images of people who are one loud noise away from a PTSD episode. So we're all as unique as our experiences in the military. Every veteran's different. We spent different services, different professions within that service, different lengths of time, different time frames. I mean, we're all just so much different, but there are some common things. We all rose our hands and swore an oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States for however long we did that. So there are some biases, positive ones, but there are a lot of negative ones. And I shared with you folks before, as a consultant on leadership, I was faced with people saying, "Oh, we don't need military style leadership." It's like, well, I'm not sure what the definition of military style leadership is.
Yeah.
And as it turns out, from a deeper conversation with that person, they had no direct experience with the military, either things that they have heard or seen on TV.
They had a bias.
Yeah. And so that bias, they have a bias, not even sure where it came from. And there's another side to that bias where somebody says, "Oh, a military guy. Well, I need you to whip people into shape." No one being whipped. Not the way it works either. So there's some misconceptions all the way around for both good and bad reasons.
Yeah, that's for sure. And with PTSD, the awareness of PTSD now, I honestly have thought about PTSD a lot. I don't know if it's because during COVID, I was watching all these old military shows on History Channel or anything, but, PTSD for military people has been around as long as there's been a military. That's
Yes,
basically,
yes.
and probably worse so. And I'm not saying worse so in that it's not as bad now as it was then or anything like that, because I have no clue, first of all. But just by the sheer numbers of people that were affected by the wars, that's the only thing is my gauge of this, and the type of warfare. When you look at World War I, World War II, and so forth. I mean, yeah, just can't
Yeah.
imagine.
Well, I think.
But
Sorry.
that bias, I'm sorry, that bias, that someone might have for that, getting back to that is that it alleviates, right? If you know more about it. Now we know, we knew PTC was always there, but they didn't really have, we know much more about it now, and much more of a sensitive appreciation for it. Before it's always the bias, and it's the ignorance, not the ignorance, but it's just not understanding, not having the information.
Lack of understanding.
Well, you remember what the image of men were, because it was mostly men that went to war, right? With the image of men, right? You don't complain. You suck it up, you deal with it, right? And it's not okay to talk about your feelings, that kind of thing, back a long time ago. We also didn't have the same level of communication back then. I believe that there was just as much PTSD with those vets. They just didn't have the forums in which to express it, which again brings a lot more awareness because of the level of communication. So now vets have lots of resources.
Yeah.
Now.
That's cool.
Yeah.
But let's not forget either. I know we're talking about vets right now, but you don't have to be a vet to experience PTSD, right?
Yeah.
So
Sure.
people who have had victims of domestic violence, so forth and so on, have all have PTSD as well.
Yeah. But you're right, and as Andrew said, understanding, like anything, a military person, military people in general, and understanding that there is as unique as the shades in the color spectrum, that it really is about the individual, like anything else, and the bias needs to be peeled back to really understand what who you're talking with, and what you're going to find in there. Because just because you are in the military doesn't mean PTSD, doesn't mean that you're going to be extremely organized, or you're going to be up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I mean, there's as you can explain more, it's a wide range of people, and it really takes understanding the people behind behind it that are there in front of you.
The truth data sets you free, right? So
understanding,
bias lies, and people make assumptions about things and ideas about things that they don't understand, and that's the root of it, But what I find interesting, Ron, in your discussions, if it was about what I really like about the military is you really are in the people business, 100%. And we're all kind of in the people business at the end of the day, but it's really based down to their focus on that, right? And to have the warrior in the best possible. I mean, they got to be in the best health. They have to be the right frame. They really pay attention to all those details that maybe in the business world we just, hey.
Well, in the military, we depend on each other for our lives.
Yeah.
What I mean? We depend on each other for our very lives. So that makes, even if there's somebody you don't like or don't get along with for whatever reason, you have a mission to do, and the mission sort of trumps all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So in the military, everybody is from a different place. It's not like you're walking to somewhere local where most of the people are either from the local area, went to college together, or something like that. Everybody is from somewhere else. So the first, I went to the Naval Academy prep school before I went to the Naval Academy. Both at the prep school and the Naval Academy, you had to learn everybody's name and where they were from. And I still remember to this day when I see these people, oh, this is Jeff Shirk from Towson, Maryland. This is, Michelle LaForge from Las Cruces, New Mexico. I just know that attached to their names because everybody is from somewhere else, right? Yeah. So you don't have any old college buds, high school buds all together. Even from the Naval Academy, we all end up going out into the fleet because such a small percentage of officers come out, from the Naval Academy.
Yeah.
So everybody is from somewhere else. So you have to find a way, to get along. You have to put your biases away. I walked in from Camden, New Jersey. I stand next, I'm in a room with a guy from Houston and a good old boy from Arkansas with an accent that I can barely understand, and a surfer dude from California, and somebody with a heavy Boston accent that I can't understand. So people are from everywhere, which makes it great because there's not a major city in the country I can go to and not know someone.
Yeah. Well, that's great because you're put into a situation too where you can embrace that, right? It's the attitude of going into that situation, and then how do you get the people? All right, you met somebody you can hardly understand because he's from Boston, like for example. So how do you get the organization then to go around and not only to accept all those differences, but even to value them, in a way so that when you go into a really bad situation, that you trust that person enough, you have a tight enough relationship that they have your back and those kind of things. And I just it's fascinating to me and how
trust, process, and culture, right?
Yeah.
If I know someone, and this is a bias, someone who's a graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy, for me that is implied high level of trust. I am one that gives trust first, right? There's some people that make you earn your trust, right? There's a difference. I'm one that gives it, but for a fellow Naval Academy graduate, fellow military officer, I would a higher level of trust. And that is my bias. That is a bias.
Yeah.
Because bias it's just a strange thing, but there's no. And especially negative biases too. There's no profit in it, from the business perspective.
I would just let the current climate in our conversation, let's not forget that bias is much more than what we're talking about, right? Bias can exist in a lot of forms: cultural, religious, racial, gender, sexual orientation, age, physical appearance.
Age. Talking to the current crowd here. So the one thing that I've always, and this is, I was never in the military full time. My service was in the National Guard, but I always, from the time you walked in, the thing that I liked, and I know it has to be different in full-time service, was that, in my experience, they really stamp on the fact that we are here for a mission. We are all in this together, and they knock that bias down as much as they can right away, or uncover it, whatever you call it, but get past the bias, because everyone has to work together. Can you explain your experiences with that in the military, and then maybe some idea, I just start with that.
Well, I think it's through purpose, right? Because everybody, what's the purpose? I repeated it to you, and every veteran that you encounter will be able to say, what was your mission? Because we took an oath: support and defend the Constitution of the United States, right? That is the purpose. That is the purpose larger than self, to serve this country that we love and to make sure that it stays the way it is.
Yeah.
Or was, based on the current environment.
Yeah.
So I think that purpose is really what unites people. That's passion. Yeah. That ignites people's passion. So for your business, right, there's a bunch of basic things that I think people want. And I'll just tell you what I want from a workplace, right? I want respect, right? I want respect. I want some level of empathy. I want to be trusted to do the job for which I was hired. I want some recognition. Don't tell me, hey, Ron, great job coming in on time every day. But, some sort of recognition, right? We all crave recognition for the work that we do, opportunities for growth and development, and then purpose, right? We all want a purpose. For me, I try to find a purpose larger than self. What I'm doing, a purpose larger than self, some method of adding value to other people and making a difference in the lives of others. And I think, for me, as far as the military goes, people are passionate about this country and their love.
Yeah.
I am.
Yeah.
I'll show you the background on my
sorry.
my
there you go.
Wallpaper on my phone since I've had a smartphone, and that's where it's going to stay.
Yeah.
So I love this guy.
Yeah.
That's great. Cool.
Yeah, it's too bad we couldn't get that passion across the U.S. right now. That's all I'm saying. We're just bringing people together.
We'll leave that one alone.
Yeah, we're gonna leave that alone. We're leaving it alone. I'm just saying it at that. I just because that's the one thing that I think that the military is obviously not without problems, and there are some obvious challenges in the military and stuff. But I do think that some of the bias that we have in the private sector, in the general public, now you see the Black Lives Matter and the other things that we have in the and it had been on, honestly, this is just the latest piece of what has been happening for an awful long time that we need to continue to address and to continue to understand and continue to do to be better at, is what was brought up in the conversation about veterans a couple of weeks ago was unconscious bias. And I think that it happens. We don't even know it happens. I mean, like unconsciously, I don't like the color, purple. I don't like that color, but and it can be something as simple as that, or something as that has been just part of what we do and we don't even think about it. So what are your thoughts around unconscious bias, Ron? And then when you talk about in the workplace, can you explain a little bit of the bias? And I don't, about the workplace, being an African American male in the workplace. What are some of the things that surprise you coming from the military to the private sector?
Well, there's some of those things don't have to do with me being an African American male. I mean, a lot of it was sort of high levels of trust, right? And we did have high levels of trust in the military, and I implicitly trust people. And then I had a job as a consultant, and I was in a position where someone just took credit for my work, and wasn't, and I was just shocked. It's like, how did I do that, right? Because I just came from an environment where people wouldn't do that. I came from an environment of extremely high performers. I'm a graduate of the U.S. Naval Test Pilot School. We tend to have high performers in those types of environments.
Yeah.
And then I was a spacecraft manager for a satellite program. Again, high performing people, and then walk into a situation where people are unethical. It really surprised me. Took me back. My transition was pretty easy, but there are some things, it's like, that people assume that I'm good at because you're a military guy. Hey, you're going to show up at 7 a.m. Well, maybe not.
Yeah.
Let's take care of that bias right away.
Some of the things that surprised me at my transition had more to do with not being around high performing people and trustworthy people. Oh my goodness. And I'm not saying it doesn't exist in the military, but it is absolutely not tolerated in the military.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I wasn't very much of it. So that the level of exposure to unprofessional people was a little bit jarring for me. And this doesn't have anything to do with bias, but I found it very difficult to leave my first job because I had never been in a position where I could actually leave a job before.
That's an interesting.
Walk away and say I quit. I felt like I was failing and I wasn't carrying through with
Yeah.
the mission. And I went, wait a minute, this job isn't getting me from where I am to where I want to be. So, and I don't see it happening in this company, so I'm going to have to go elsewhere. And I was very sorry and apologetic to the president of the company. And he was very understanding and said, hey, we'd love having you here. You did great. You're welcome back anytime. I understand why you're leaving. So I thought that was good. But again, it was very difficult for me to leave that job.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's very interesting.
So I'm not sure I answered your question, but I will tell you, I'm not sure how much time we have. But in terms of bias in general, I as an African-American male, my journey through corporate America and America in general it's been different from yours. And just like women have different experiences and things that we have. Yeah. My journey has just been different than yours. And for just people to recognize that. There's nothing you have to say, but realize that, again, I have to maybe deal with things that maybe you didn't. And I told you guys that story before, and it's not my story, and I can't remember the name of the guy. Otherwise, I would give him credit. But he talked about the window in his car.
Yes.
The driver's side window, the electric driver's side window, not being able to roll it down. Right. And it hit me because if for some people, majority of people, if you can't roll that window down, it would be a minor annoyance to you, and you would just get it fixed when you can. For me, that could potentially put me in a life-threatening situation if I get pulled over by a police officer. So I would consider that an absolute priority to get fixed. I'd take a day off of work to go get that fixed.
Yeah.
Right. And something that you just probably wouldn't think about. And I've had some bad experiences by the police. I've been treated very poorly by the police in some situations. But I'm but I don't hold every police officer responsible for that. Right. I still respect the police. In fact, I went to the Bellevue Citizens Police Academy, and I was one of the advisors for the community, the African American community, to the police department in Bellevue before I moved.
Very cool.
So just sharing my experiences.
Yeah.
It's interesting, in that situation, and it's such a different, experience. But I mean, if you had to take a day off work to get your window repaired too, what's the reaction from your employer towards that?
PTO is PTO. You know what I mean? It's like, hey, I'll use my PTO to do it, and it's like, hey, perfect.
Yeah.
No detail.
Well, thanks for sharing that. That's that.
Yeah.
I think that's a very small details.
Right. It's not mine, but it's such a great story, and it resonated with me that you said we just don't understand because we haven't walked down that path, and that's what I think that your story is so enlightening to people that don't understand. If you can hear more of these stories, what it's like to be in the military, what it's like to be an African American, what it's like to be an Asian person in the United States, whatever we're trying to understand more about, it starts with us understanding, because it's sure as hell not going to get solved by somebody in the government. It's sure as hell not going to get solved by the people that are extreme left or extreme right on these subjects. It's about people like us that know each other, trust each other, like each other, and need to understand this better, because from us, it grows. That's where it has to start, with the people that are around us to understand, and around you to understand, and in your circle and understand more and embrace it. Because and when we talk about bias, it also, you can't really talk about bias without diversity. And diversity is one of the best things you can have in a business.
There's profit.
What's that?
There's profit there.
Yeah, there's profit there. There's profit there. Because, so we really need to understand people better. And I think for my last little rant there I was on, is understanding helps us to get to understand will help us to eliminate the bias. But when we talk about bias and diversity, the understanding allows us to get to the diversity that we want, at least in business, to be able to really harness the creativity and the problem solving and the other things that you get from that. Because I think when you look at it and you look at the military and think about what business does, the military has created that ecosystem where everybody has to work together for that common mission, no matter who, what, doesn't matter. We're all working together and doing that, right? We need to get more of that in business when we're talking about it.
Right. The key more to understanding is awareness, because some things you're just not going to understand. So if you guys are married and you have kids, right, no woman can explain to a man what it's or make a man understand what it's like to carry a baby or another human being in her body and give birth, right?
Nope.
You will never understand that, but you're just aware that it's something that you just have no idea. And it's sort of the same thing, right? So there's some things that you just may not ever understand, but just that awareness of it, right?
Yeah.
Well, self-awareness is good too. Self-awareness of your own biases. I told you guys about some of mine. I'm aware of mine, and at least aware enough to call somebody else in for an opinion when your whatever you're thinking may be driven by your own bias, right? Mm-hmm. And then make some efforts to deliberately seek out differences or different opinions or different people.
Yeah.
You're in a boardroom and around a table and all the members of the board are stuck. You walk outside and grab the executive assistant and ask the executive assistant what he or she thinks. They may come up with a good answer. Even the person emptying the trash. You just never know, right? So just seek out those differences and be aware, self-aware that you have biases and biases exist. And that's the key, I think.
Yeah, so that's great. I think you touched on a point there too, that biases, happen because it's a bit of laziness. It's easy to get a bias, rather than really trying to learn more and understand, and open up. You could just write it off as a bias. They're just that way, or or that someone else is just that way. I think it's the good organizations and like the military and in the private sector that I see that work really hard, on that to get past that kind of stuff. And awareness is the first step, but it also takes work to get around bias. You'll never understand, right? But
it's subject for a different round table. But in our 140 character world, I don't think there's room for discussions, right? There's people shouting back and forth with each other.
That's for sure. And it is part of it too. You hit part of it is that our attention span now as a whole is going down by the second, and going down 2 seconds, and in taking the time to be aware and understand is even harder than ever to get people to do.
It takes work to do.
We got a couple people on LinkedIn. I'm just going to say thanks, Andrew Deutsch and Ira Bowman, for watching us here. I don't know how to see all the other people that are watching, but thanks, because this is our first one, and that as well. So you were going to say something, Andrew? Sorry.
No, this is good. You got it.
I just
we're getting towards the end, so we have.
We're getting towards the end here, but Ron, I sure am appreciative of you stopping by, and it's just been a pleasure.
Thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it. This is twice now that you've given me a chance to speak to other people. So I really appreciate your faith in me and your faith enough to have me on your first LinkedIn Live episode.
Well, we appreciate you being our experiment here with the LinkedIn. So we'll see how it looks.
Yeah. And I know we may not have given the subject the justice it deserves, but we are trying. And we were honestly trying. So
great discussion.
We will do that. But again, Ron Higgs, go ahead and reach out to him on LinkedIn, connect with him. Great guy, great fractional COO consultant. Connect with him. He's got a lot to give. thank you for being on the show today. Andrew, any parting thoughts?
No. Hey, have a great day.
Yeah, we will. Thanks, guys.
All right.
And we will be back soon.
All right.